Epigenetics is a word that's tossed around a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like you were talking earlier about quantum physics, and one could enhance their stature by
Mm-hmm.
throwing in a little quantum physics here and there, right? Maybe epigenetics is a little bit like that. I think people kind of throw the term around, but it's fairly complex. Maybe you can help us with that a little bit. I was interested,
Sure.
you use the term junk genes when you were talking about that.
Junk DNA, actually. Junk DNA. So junk, I corrected that, and you saw the earlier print of the book.
Oh, okay.
The book isn't actually out yet, so the term is really junk DNA. So let's take epigenetics in perspective.
Yeah.
Actually, it was Aristotle that kind of had this term epigenes, and then Waddington coined the term epigenetics. And Waddington was a major figure in biology in the mid part of the 20th century. But anyway, so let's take a look at our gene pool. So the Human Genome Project, roughly about 18 years ago, or turn of the century, attempted to take a look at the human genome. And we thought we had roughly about 100,000 genes. And what are genes? Genes are sections of your DNA that code for protein. And what percentage would you estimate of our DNA codes for protein? And again, that's the genes. I'll just jump.
2%. I have no idea.
2%. So what happens to the other 98%? Whoa, it's not like it's junk DNA. Some people called it because we didn't know what it was. Right?
Like the glial cells that we were talking about. We thought this was junk
exactly.
stuff in our brain.
And now anything like black hole or dark matter, anything we don't understand, we call something out there. Well, DNA, junk DNA. Wait a minute. That 98% of your DNA does a lot of very important things. Now, if you define genes as, first of all, nobody really agrees to what a gene is, but in general, it's a section of your DNA that codes for protein. What other species has the same number of genes if you define genes as sections of your DNA that code for protein? I'll just jump to the answer. The earthworm. So if the earthworm has as many genes as us, are they sitting around having all these disorders that we back in the 1980s, not me, but part of popular culture, had over-identified as genetic determinism, which the geneticists now are calling genetic astrology. This idea that every disease that is out there is associated with some bad gene. Like you got an alco gene, you got a schizophrenic gene, you got a depressive gene, you got a this gene, and all. Well, wait a minute. Are earthworms crawling around under the surface here and going to psychiatric clinics and getting drugs for their schizophrenia and all that, and panic attacks and everything else? Wait a minute. If we have as many genes as they do, what's going on here? What's going on here is things are far more complex. Genetic determinism didn't work. Actually, you can turn on and off genes, not as simplistically as pop psychology would have you believe, like people that throw around the word epigenetics, just have a positive thought and you turn on a good gene or so on and so forth. But your lifestyle has a major effect. What you did earlier today when you went to the gym before we started talking has an epigenetic effect. Our pattern of regular exercise, regular diet, having positive relationships, and so on, have epigenetic effects. Let me talk about one major shift that incorporates the so-called social brain networks that we were talking about earlier, that has been a big part of psychology since the late 1990s. So there's a group of researchers at McGill University in Canada, sort of the Harvard of Canada, Michael Meany and others, who have demonstrated first with rats, and then the research is expanded from there to include humans. But let's talk initially about the rats. Good-looking mothers lick their rat pups Those are good mothers. That's nurturance. The rats, the pups that don't get licked, have a different health outcome. So you got good nurturance and bad nurturance. The good nurturance results in the development of a better thermostat in your brain for stress. John Bowlby was right. Good attachment results in a better thermostat, more resiliency later on. And if you could permit me to just explain some of the neurochemistry.
Sure.
So good nurturance helps express the cortisol receptor gene that results in more cortisol receptors on your hippocampus that act like a thermostat for cortisol. So for example, when the stress level goes up, let's say, for example, when we used to have lunch a lot, and I was working at Kaiser Permanente, I had to drive down from Sonoma County to San Rafael, where my office was. Well, there's a lot of traffic on 101. And if I didn't have a very good thermostat, when all these people were kind of moving around and, I'm having to kind of just keep my speed there and not get all worked up. If I didn't have a very good thermostat, by the time I got to work, roughly 45 minutes later, I'd be all worked up, worked up with stress, too much cortisol. Yeah. I wasn't able to turn off the production of my HPA axis.